So literally, it was like good and evil. I had my bed, my closet, and all my drugs. And my dad had his office and all his sermons. And it was like a fight. My name is Anthony Calvary Jr., and this is my story. As a kid, me and my sister were raised in church. We grew up in church our whole lives. We were at church Wednesdays, Sundays, Saturdays, Sundays, Fridays. We had double services on Sunday morning, Sunday night. As a young kid, we always took the back seat as our mom and dad took on ministry. So growing up in school, I couldn't read, couldn't write, couldn't spell. Got made fun of a lot, got picked on, got bullied. Kind of a mischievous kid. Well, yeah, I was mischievous, and I was always a crying wolf type of kid. So nobody really believed me when I would say the teachers were abusing, like hitting me, and because I couldn't read and they thought I was lying. Kids would make fun of me. My parents just didn't kind of really believe me because I was always kind of messing around, lying about things. And I got to the point where I was getting really frustrated and tired of people making fun of me. And I came home crying one day. And my dad had told me, don't let anybody pick on you. And I didn't hear that. I just heard, get them, right? So there was two people. I was always two people. And every time that I wasn't with my parents, I was game in anything that was mischievous, anything that was causing trouble, right? A couple of my friends, we broke into this abandoned house, and we were writing on walls. We were writing on the walls inside the house, and it was white paint. And I guess I was too close where a little bit of paint was splashed in my face. And it was a Wednesday night. Like I said, we were always in church. It was always about church until I was 18. So it was a Wednesday night. I had to hurry up and get home. I already had a guilty look on my face. I got home, and Mom was like, what are you up to, Champ? And then I was like, nothing. And she was like, no, you're up to something. I said, I'm not up to nothing. She looks close and she sees paint, a little bit of paint on my face. And she's like, you're sniffing paint. And I was like, what? Sniffing paint? No, I'm not sniffing paint. What the heck are you talking about? She was like, you're sniffing paint, babe. You should hate Champ sniffing paint. My dad goes, you better stop sniffing paint, boy. You're crazy. You're going to burn all your bird cells. And I was thinking to myself, what the heck are they talking about? So a week later, I went and sprayed some paint on the wall and started trying to smell it. And my friend said, no, you put it in a bag, put it in a plastic bag. And boom, we started sniffing paint. And I started getting high on paint. And then I went from paint to glue to markers to gasoline. It was like we were just trying a computer cleaner. It was like I learned. They brought something to my attention. I was like, what the heck? You can get high off that? So again, it was just me trying to be the opposite of what my parents were. You know what I mean? My dad was a pastor. My mom supported him. He was a working pastor, so he would work. My mom would work. From the time I went to school to about 6 o'clock is when I got to do whatever I wanted to do without my parents knowing anything, because they both worked. So people would come over the house. Like I said, we can get cigarettes. Me and my sister, we smoke a whole pack of GPCs back in the day. Those ghetto pack cigarettes, we would say. And we'd smoke them in the house. Clear it all out before my mom came. My dad came. I got kicked out of a lot of schools. I went to 5 high schools. 5 high schools for fighting. Again, I couldn't read, so I went to pretty much 4 schools in Whittier, 3 schools in Whittier, 2 schools in Downey. Some of the fighting caught up to me. These guys approached me and they told me, hey, you beat up one of our homeboys. And I was like, it was a one-on-one fight. And they're like, nah, you know what? We're going to have a couple of dudes for you to fight tomorrow. Come back to school. And I was like, dang, I was kind of scared. My face always told what was going on with me. I could never hide it. Even when it was to drugs, I could not hide it. And I remember my dad's in the living room, and he said, what's up, Champ? And I was like, what's up? And he was like, what's wrong with you? I was like, nothing. He's like, what's wrong, bro? Tell me. I was like, nothing. He goes, all right, I'm going to find out, dude. And I said, man, they're going to jump me at school tomorrow. And my dad, I'll never forget it. I was making a burger, and he puts his head down and he shakes it, and he says, man, you better go to school. And I was like, dude, man, I wasn't looking for that answer. I was maybe hoping he would say, don't go to school. My dad, he was a good father, man. He was a great dad. So he never ran, so he always taught me that same personality. I never ran. So I went to school, and I was so scared, and we only had 4 periods. So the first period came, nothing happened. The second, third, and the fourth period came, and I knew, like, this is it. I'm gonna get beat up today. Bad, probably. And I remember going out of my classroom, and I see my crazy Uncle Louie. He was kicking back on the pole. I had my other crazy Uncle Brian. He was going like this, and I see my dad, and he brought my uncles. And I was like, the heck? Back me up, dude. Like, what the heck? It's on, I was thinking like, dang, we're going to beat up everybody in the school today. Nobody's messing with us, and my dad was like, what's up? And I was like, so we went outside, and my uncles followed me, and I just felt like, man, I was so happy, like I had my family. And went to the corner, we waited, and my dad was like, just kick it right here, let him come to us. Nobody came. We waited and waited, and nobody came, and finally my dad's like, dude, let's go. But you better get a job, because you can't be doing this anymore. You need to get a job. That was the end of my high school, I guess you would say, career. I never finished high school. I was a dropout. When my parents were in church, we would go with the neighborhood kids, little gangbangers, and hang out with them. We'd break into the school. And while my parents were at church, right on the walls at the school, we broke into a classroom, got a fire. She was acting crazy, And so my mom knew I was doing things I shouldn't be doing. And so one day she took me to service. She said, you're not going anywhere. You're sitting at service today. And I wanted to leave. And she's like, Champ, you're not going anywhere. And Tony, when I was in trouble, it was always Tony. She's like, Tony, you better sit there. You're not going nowhere. And I was like, okay. And so song service, I was sitting down in song service, and this lady in the church, Vera, starts praying for me while sitting in church. And I was so upset that she was praying for me, and I was like trying to shove her off and like, get off of me, Finally, she stopped praying for me, and I was like so mad at that. I was like, man, I gotta go to the restroom. And so my mom's like, you better come right back, boy. And I was like, okay. So I went outside. So as soon as I go outside, I see one of my best friends sitting right there. He's like, hey, let's go to the store. Let's go. The store is right across the street. And we were crossing the street, and instead of looking the way I should have been looking, I was looking the other way. And I ran. And when I ran across the street, a car hit me, wiped me out. I flipped. I did about 2 flips in the air, fell down on my butt, on my elbows. I felt like I almost bit my whole tongue off. I got up to the curb, passed out, and I had ambulance. The whole church was stopped. Everybody was out there. My dad was praying for me. It's like I was coughing. My dad started freaking out because I thought I had internal bleeding. I didn't listen. That's pretty much my whole life. I've never really listened. And so I used to always say that if I'm going to get to heaven, I'm going to get to heaven like the thief on the cross, or just cry out in the end, ask the Lord to save me and get into heaven by the skin of my teeth. That was what I used to always think. And one day I was with another good friend of mine, and we were catering a wedding, and I was in the back seat, and we were driving down, I think it was Brookshire, and we were going to make a left on Stewart and Gray. And all I remember was we making the left, and it was kind of fast, and I grabbed the bag. I had a big pot of soup or stew and like between my legs right here, and I grabbed the bag from it to stop rolling. And that was it. I don't remember anything now. I went to the hospital, and I remember going to the hospital. I hated hospitals. I didn't like them at all. And I wanted to leave, and I went to Inglewood trauma. I'm sitting right there, and I'm pulling everything off that they're putting on me. Put those little things on you to check your heart. I was taking them off, and they thought it was delirious, and I just wanted to leave. And the doctor comes in, and he's just like doing that. And then they're like pointed at me, and the guy, this is him. This is him. And he was like, how many fingers do I have up? He tells me. He's checking my eyes, and he goes, you know what happened to you? I said I was in a car accident. He's like, no, you were ejected out of a car. And I was like, okay. And he tells me to squeeze his fingers. I squeeze his fingers, and he starts moving around. He goes, I've never seen this before. And I was like, what are you talking about? I've been working trauma for quite some time, and we had a call for a young kid being ejected out of a car, 15 to 16 feet out of the car. I was thinking of a kid that's going to have paralyzed head trauma, broken bones, and I'm looking at you. He says, give me 6 numbers out of your head. I was like, for what? It was just given to me. So I gave it to him. He goes, you got to be one of the luckiest people I've ever met. This never happens. I walked out of that hospital with no broken bones. Nothing. Just that same day. I was sore. I had road rash. The same thing with the car accident when I got hit by the car. Not one broken bone. My buddy had an option whether he's to buy an ounce of pot or a quarter ounce of speed. And he went with the speed. And so I did a line here, did a line there. And all of a sudden I started driving him around while he was slanging his dope. And I was just his driver pretty much, and I got really into meth at 99. And the first time I hit it, I was amazed by it. I was like, whoa, this is a different high. I like this, it was good. And we started smoking speed, and it was like an everyday thing. My dad's office was my room. So literally it was like good and evil. I had my bed, my closet, and all my drugs. And my dad had his office and all his sermons. And it was like a fight. I mean, there was one time in my dad's house on Mystic where I just snapped. I was on a good one, and I started cussing and yelling at him, and he had said, man, I don't even know why I'm doing what I'm doing anymore. And I remember telling him, don't quit. You gave up on your whole family for this church. You better not quit now, or for nothing. And I was just going off on him. And he was shaking his head like, man, I can't believe it. He was preaching a revival that weekend. And I remember slamming the door, and I went in my garage, and I could hear my mom saying, don't let the enemy rob you from this. And I thought, like, what? And I went back, I'm the enemy? I'm your enemy? I'm your son? I was out of my mind, right? And my dad didn't want to do anything. He was afraid that I was going to snap out. So I went back in the garage, and my mom's like, go to church, preach. Don't let this happen. So my dad went. And that night he came home when I was watching TV, and he walks into the house, and he looks, and I was like, what's up, Dad? And he was looking at me like, the heck? You're normal? I was like, how was it? And he was like, you know what? It was good. I realized that I was going through the same thing that everybody else was going through. Man, God broke. Everybody was crying. God moved. It was a revival. We were praying, and I realized that, man, I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing no matter what. And I just felt like, man, dude, I literally was being used that day. And I was really, really mean person when I was on that. So I think in 2004 is when I finally thought, like, a couple of my buddies' houses were getting raided, and I didn't want my dad's house getting raided. So I decided to ask my dad, hey, you think you could help me get out of here? Send me to Jacob's Ladder out in Kansas City. It was a men's home, halfway house for ex-drug addicts, dudes that were just getting out of prison. It was a place where you can go and get rehabilitated, but you had to go to church, you had to pray, you had to do your scripture reading, you had to be involved with church, you had to do work, whether it was work around the house or somebody would come pick you up and you go do work for them. I remember I was on the phone with Pastor Kelly, and I had a speed pipe, and I was cooking my dope, smoking it while I was talking to him, saying, I want out. I don't want this life anymore. I don't want to be a drug addict. I want to get back to doing what I do. I was an electrician already. I was in and out. I was kind of a functioning addict at the time, but not really. I was out of work, let you go, and then I'll quit. I'll do another job, let you go, and then I'd quit. So I got to the point where I got tired of it, and I just wanted to cut the drugs. So they agreed, and they got me a plane ticket. I sold my truck, bought an 8-ball, and got high all weekend. I stood up for like 7 days, and I was seeing like demons, man. It was crazy that night, that whole week. And I left, and I remember leaving and landing in Kansas City, and I did feel like something kind of pulled from me, and I got to the men's home. I checked in, and I was there for 9 months. So I come back 9 months later. I was 24, and I started dabbling with speed again, but my mom and dad weren't having it. I got caught up with a girl, and she kind of wasn't having it either. I put down the speed, never picked it up again, and I found cocaine. So I started messing with cocaine. Then I found Vicodins, started messing with Vicodins. And then I moved out of my house and moved in with this girl. And we started really getting serious, and I introduced coke to her. Little by little, we started doing it often, and it went from often to maybe once every weekend. We were like a party couple, we were constantly partying. That was my thing. I was doing it. I was working. I had a stable job, so I was a functioning addict. I didn't think I had an issue because I was able to keep my job at this point. We got married. She wasn't saved. She didn't know God. She didn't have any plans for God. So that was our life for 15 years. We were partying, doing coke. We were kind of just a disaster for each other. I didn't tell her she had an issue. She didn't tell me I had an issue. And we just carried on this relationship that was just a party mode relationship. I started talking to my dad about it, and he started saying, hey, just bring her to church. Just try to bring her to church, And so we would try to go to church, and it wasn't her thing, Church wasn't her thing. I started trying to pull ourselves away from certain people to not do drugs. And there'd be some times where I'm like, hey, I'm not going to drink at all, because I couldn't drink without coke. So if I figured I don't want to do coke, I can't drink. So I'll just smoke weed and take pills. I tried to cut people out, and she didn't really like that. She didn't really want to stop. She wasn't planning on stop partying. She wasn't planning on stop drinking. She wasn't planning on maybe stop doing coke. She kind of got upset about it, and I think in 2018 she left in March for a month, and that was kind of tough. I didn't tell my dad. I didn't tell nobody. I didn't tell my friends. She just left, and I kind of just hid it. She came back in April, and she stood around for another 6 months. She left again. I remember writing the day she left, because I was always worried that if she messed around, got pregnant, came back, tried to say it was mine. So I didn't trust her. It really hit me hard this time, and I was pretty devastated by it. It hurt because I didn't know why she was leaving. She kept saying it was me. I don't know who you are sober. You've never been sober since this whole time in our relationship. You're always drunk, you're always on coke, you're always on weed, I'm just tired of the way you are, you're always mad, you're always mean. She's saying all these things about me, so she started putting me down to a point where I was like, I went back to that kid in the 3rd grade, right? And I wanted to quit everything. I wanted to quit my job. At this time, I was already a superintendent as an electrician. I didn't want to go in my room because I had guns in my room, and I was scared that I was going to try to do something to hurt myself, because at this time, I was really, really tore up about it. I started seeing a therapist, started trying to do Kung Fu, and I was trying to resolve it by myself. No God, no prayer, no nothing. And my sister would say that. My dad would drive around Whittier waiting for me to call because he knew something was up. And I didn't want to talk to him because I was like ashamed, like, dude, this is supposed to be married, And so finally I called him and told him what was happening. And he's like, can I come over? I said, yeah, come over. So he came over, and that night he pulled out his oil, and he just started anointing my house, praying loud in tongues. I was closing the windows, shutting the door. I was like, man, this dude's crazy. In the end, he told me, you should pray and ask God to give you the answer. Just ask him. You're not asking him in your heart, champ. You're not, just talk to him. Just open up to him and see what he can do for you. So I started doing it a little bit, and I started asking God for strength and guidance, and not serving God, not surrendering to him, but just doing those things. And I was getting to the part where we would go to dinner or lunch, but she wasn't living in the house. We were like kind of separated at this time. And I started feeling like, you know what? I'm going to be okay. I can live without her. I can pay my bills. I can do my thing. I'm making great money. I really don't need her. I could be a friend. Her best friend calls her. She doesn't answer, and she calls. She doesn't answer, and she calls. And I'm like, what the heck's going on? She's like, she's been doing this all day. And I was like, well, what? What does she want? She's like, I don't know. I just don't want to talk to her. It's her best friend. This is the people that we used to party with and do drugs with, drink with, go on vacations with, What do you mean you don't want to talk to her? So she calls me. And she was like, Champ, where you at? I said, I'm right here. And she's like, well, I just want to let you know that she's having an affair with my husband. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? She's like, yeah, we hired a private investigator, and she's been having an affair with my husband. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, God knew that I was ready to have the answer to what was going on. At the time, when I was dealing with depression, when I was quitting, God knew that I wasn't going to be able to handle this. it was too hard because it was like a straight betrayal on top of people that were very close to us. I mean, we were like their kids' godfathers, so it was a huge deal. And my dad called me one day. He's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Nothing." He goes, "What are you up to today?" I said, "I'm just right here. You're going to go to work?" I said, "Yeah, it was early." We would call each other in the morning, and he was just like, "Just want to tell you I love you, champ, and I want to let you know that God gave you a clean slate. You could either forgive this woman and never bring it up again, or you can walk away and have a clean slate with the Lord and maybe try it again later. It's up to you, champ." And I was like, "I'm going to take my slate." And I drove off and I never looked back, and that was it, I got a divorce and I was back to partying. I had money. I had a great job. I had a cabinet and it was just full of drugs. I'd wake up and be like, all right, I gotta get this, and just bounce, right? And go to my thing. And at this time I was making contraptions because I wasn't getting high on weed. So my thing was I would grind up shrooms, put in my coffee, Baileys, drive to work smoking weed. That was just a normal thing. Like, I was so, tolerance was so high at this point, it was crazy. I'd be on 5 drugs, standing up, talking, partying. I started being with, different women and started realizing that nobody cares, nobody, it's a free-for-all, and I thought that's the life that I wanted after my ex had left and I was divorced, and these girls were coming after me. I was single, I had a good job, I had my own place, had a couple cars, girls seeing that I was successful, so it was like all coming at me. I started coming to church a little bit, I started coming here to reach. I'd come here on a Sunday and just kind of clear my head from all of it, I mean, this is already, I'm already 40 years old, and I've been living the same life. I had a friend, he kind of checked me one day, and he said, "Man, you're still doing the same thing, bro. When are you going to grow up?" I thought, like, damn, that's hard. I've been doing this since I've been a long time, and it kind of, like, hit me. And then my dad had said, "Hey, champ, who are you accountable to?" So what do you mean? Because you're accountable to anybody? You don't have a kid, you don't have a wife, you don't have a girl, you're just out there, man. You need to be accountable to somebody. You need to talk to somebody about things that you're going through. You need that in your life, son. I didn't talk to anybody, just my dog, So I started coming to church, but I wasn't trying to get saved. I wasn't trying to give my life to the Lord. I just wanted a little bit of peace in my life, a little bit of normal life, And I didn't know what it was. I started listening to worship, started praying a little bit here, reading the Bible. I'd catch myself reading the Bible and nobody around by myself, like, what the heck? So I started talking to my dad about it. And my dad was telling me that my soul's tired. You need to just give it up and give God a chance. 3 weeks in a row I came here, right? And Pastor Omar told my dad, "Hey, your son's been coming to church." My dad got all happy. And Pastor Omar was like, "Don't say anything. Just let him be." And my mom posted it, "Hey, my son's been coming to church." I was so furious, was mad. I didn't want that. I wanted to be on my own. I didn't want to be under their covering or, "Oh, this is my son." I was so mad that she posted on Instagram. I called my dad and told her, "Take that off. I'm not saved. I'm just coming to church. Let me be. I don't want a Bible study. I don't want any of that. I don't want none of that. Just let me be." And my dad was like, "We're sorry, champ. We didn't mean it. We're just happy." And I was like, "Well, don't do that, And so kind of backed off, and he was preaching here on a Wednesday night, and he told me, "Hey, son, come. It's 2021. This is last Wednesday. Come check it out till I'm preaching." And I was like, "I don't want to go." He's like, "Why not?" I said, "Because nobody knows who I am there. And I know what you're going to do, Dad. You're going to be like, 'Hey, my son's here. They're going to see me.' And I don't want that. I just want to come to church and be left alone." He's like, "I'm going to save you a seat." I said, "Okay." I didn't come. But I knew God was dealing with me a lot. And I got to the point where I was like deciding to be a designated driver from time to time with my friends just so I wouldn't have to get loaded. And it was a Sunday. My dad got COVID. And I was calling him every day. Everybody was scared. This was a time of 21. You didn't want to have COVID. You didn't want to go to the hospital. So it was kind of scary. So I was calling him, checking up on him. He was fine. my dad calls me and he's like, what are you doing, son? I said, I'm at the game. He's like, oh, wow. We're talking. I was like, let me call you back, Dad, when I get back. So we go, we're having a good time. And at this point, I'm like, I hadn't drank anything. So I didn't really want to do coke. And my homie's just like, do a line, Champ. You haven't done anything. I was like, nah, I'm good. He goes, come on, bro. You always want to do drugs. Just do a line. So I did a big old line. And we went to the bar and I was just looking around. I was just like, this is it. This is it. This is as good as it's going to get for all of us right here. My homies are hanging over some girls, and it's just like, this sucks. I'm tired of this. And my buddy was like, just drink a beer, Champ. You've been tripping. And I was like, I want to go home, man. Snuck out and left. And I called my dad. My dad was watching a movie. This was Sunday night. And I was like, man, Dad, for some reason, I feel out of place. I don't feel like I belong here anymore. And he was like, you're tired, son. Like I told you, just surrender. Give it up. Just give God a chance. It'll be your best decision you've ever made. And we hung up. He was watching the movie, and I told him I love him. We hung up, and I started thinking, like, how could I cross the line? How could I get saved and tell my friends that I'm out and them leave me alone? And tell everybody who knows me that I'm sorry, that I wasn't the man I was supposed to be. And this is who I was always born to be. I was thinking all these, should I post a song on Instagram? Should I say a sermon? I was just thinking all this stuff, like, how could I cross? How could I do this? It was in my heart, and I felt the draw. I felt a heavy draw from God, really heavy. And I was thinking to stay, and I called my dad on Monday, and he wasn't feeling good. And on Tuesday, he's like, hey, I'm going to go to the hospital. And I was like, man, Dad, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't go to the hospital. And he's like, I'm just going to get checked out. I just feel like I can't breathe. And my mom was like, I'm just going to take him, son. He's not going to stay there. And I was like, okay, call me when you're done. They put him on an oxygen tank. We all went to the hospital. And we're all outside. You remember when you get in the hospital, you can't see them. You can't check in. None of that stuff. And if you weren't vaccinated, don't even ask the question, right? They said he was acting weird. He kept taking off his oxygen tank. Called my dad, said, what's going on, Dad? Why don't you leave your mask on? He goes, I don't want to leave it on. It's bothering me. And then the doctor's like saying something. And then he goes, the doctor says if I take the mask off, I'm going to die. And I was like, what? You just went in there for something, dude. You just went in there because you're saying you can't breathe. What the hell is he talking about? Put him on the phone. So he puts him on the phone. And I'm like, what are you talking about? My dad's going to die. Why are you threatening him like that? Don't do that. That's not right. He's fine. And he's like, well, his oxygen is low. He needs to have that on. He keeps taking it off. And I was like, I'm going to go pick him up. Because if you pick him up, it's on you. Something happens to him, but he's not well. I said, let me talk to my dad. And my friend on the phone, I said, Dad, just do what they do. Do what they're telling you to do. Don't take your tank off. Don't take your mask off. Just leave it on, man. We believe in God. We believe in the Lord. And then I thought to myself, like, I remember in the kitchen, I grabbed my chest and I was like, this was the draw. This is why I was being pulled. I felt it, and I told my mom and sister, I was like, dude, this was the draw that I was feeling. We need to pray. We need to ask God for strength. We don't know what's going to happen. And my sister and my mom, they got so upset with me because I wasn't saved. They're like, no, you better not do this. You better not run. You better have faith in God. God's going to heal him. You better not even start with this stuff. You better have faith. And I got so scared that I kept it to myself at that point. We started praying, and then 2 days later, he went into ICU, and they put him on a ventilator. My family, they were having prayer meetings. I was going to these Deborah's Warriors prayers, and I was just tripping on everybody, just praying and seeking. They were blowing trumpets, and it was wild. I've never really been at prayer meetings before, I heard of them. When I was a kid, we would go to men's prayer on Saturdays, but I never, as an adult, was going to these things. So I started praying. And I started getting really worried. At the time, I was in a big job site. I was running a lot of dudes, and I was crying, man. This was a hard burden on me. At that point, I wasn't doing any coke, but I was taking a lot of downers. I was drinking, and I was taking a lot of downers. And it was really, really getting hard for me to handle this. And I just kept praying for God to give me strength. I kept praying that God would just guide me, that I wouldn't lose it, that I wouldn't, flip out if my dad passed, that I wouldn't, do something to hurt myself. And so I never asked him into my heart. I never asked God to come into my heart. I never said any of that. I just kept praying for strength. I had a heavy burden on my life. It was heavy. I remember, I'll never forget the burden. It was like I couldn't even walk. Like I just felt this weight on me. I walked into my dad's house, made it right, went into my mom's room, and I fell on my knees and I started sobbing and praying. And I was crying so hard, man, and at this time I didn't even pray for my dad. I said the sinner's prayer. I asked the Lord to forgive me of all my sins, forgive me of everything that I've done. I'm done with this world. I'm done with this life. I don't even care if you saved my dad, but my heart was finished. I was done. And I was crying. I was crying a lot. My mom and my sister came in. They were praying for me. And it was like, I got up and my face was in a puddle of blood, man. I'm not kidding you. Like, I don't know, it was the stress, my nose popped, but my face was in blood, and my mom was like freaking out. My sister started freaking out. My mom was like, well, what's wrong with you? Are you okay? Are you okay? And I was like delirious at this point. I had no idea what happened, but I was delivered. God changed my life that day. He set me free, dude. He really did. I mean, I was transformed that day. That day, God wiped away all my sins. And it's crazy because I always think that I wasn't in a church. I wasn't with a leader. I wasn't with my dad. It was just me and God. And he saved my life. And it was a miracle, that happened. I was completely, every word out of my mouth was an F word. Weed with me constantly. Always with drugs, always with alcohol, always partying. It was gone. Like, I was instantly delivered, like, to the bone. And then 2 days later, my dad passed. My sister and everybody was worried about me. My friends worried about me, but I was saved. And God helped me through the whole situation. And you know what he did? He gave me the strength. He gave me the strength that I was asking for the entire time, man. He gave me this. For like 3 weeks, bro, I had worship music in my head. God revealed himself to me that I've never seen before. From the radio to the trees to the birds. It was crazy, bro. Like, I've never felt God's power. I've seen it, but I never felt God's hand. I felt like this big hand swooped me and took me, and I was looking back, and he just tossed me from the world. And it was like I was on a rocket. I'm serious. It's just, I know it's real because my story doesn't change. I've said this story before. It's the same story. Like, when you have that encounter with God, that supernatural encounter where he sets you free like that, man, it's hard to deny it. It's hard to ever walk away from it. So on Sunday, that Sunday, I couldn't wait. My dad's gone. My confidant, the man I always went to, was gone. But I could not wait to come to this church. And I remember driving to Reach, and I was like, Lord, I don't care what you preach. I don't care what song they sing. Today's the day that I'm declaring you as my Lord and Savior. I'm going to raise my hand. And I couldn't wait. And I got in kind of late, and I sat right there in the corner. And it was Friendship Sunday, and Pastor Omar was talking about Jesus could be your best friend. And I was like, I just lost my best friend, my dad. And it was just like, that whole sermon was to me, That whole sermon was like, he was preaching right to me. And I was like, oh my God, Lord, you're so real, dude. Like, so I rose my hand, I got saved, gave my life to the Lord, declared him, put my flag up. What's a trip is that when I was doing all this, how am I going to get saved? How am I going to let my friends know? And had that all in my mind. The Lord already had a plan. My dad's funeral, all my friends were there. And right there, I was like, there's no way I could ever live that life again with my dad up there watching me. I'm out. And that was my exit, and that was the line that God drew between me and the world. And the only way that I can cross that line could be broken is if I crossed it first. After that, God just poured out his spirit. I built a foundation. I did what my dad did: pray and read, pray and read, pray and read. That was it. That's all I did for the first 6 months. I stood away. I got sanctified. I got justified. And I started living for him. I did a podcast for my cousin. A girl had seen it. And this girl that's seen it, I've seen her before in the party scene. I've seen her at the bars before. I even smoked a cigarette next to her, but I didn't really know her. And I was in one of my friends posted her on Instagram. And I was like, oh, wow, that's that girl. And I clicked her page and I was looking at her pictures. And then I didn't like any of her pictures. And I was just looking through them. And then like 2 days later, she reached out to me and said, hey, I heard that your testimony on that podcast is really good. I'm really happy for you. In fact, I'm getting baptized this weekend too. I gave my life to the Lord. I was like, what? And I was like, this woman, she's too beautiful to even give me a chance. I invited her to Connect Group. She came to Connect Group. And we started talking. And then she invited me to her baptism. I went to her baptism. And we started talking and we hit it off. And a year later, 6 months later, we got married. And I got blessed with her. I got blessed with my son, Gavin. God started, I became a teacher in kids ministry, and I'm an usher. And, God's been so good, man. And my dad was right. My dad was absolutely right. That was the best decision I was going to ever make in my life, was to serve the Lord. In 1981, my mom was 8 months pregnant. And back then, there was no ultrasounds. There was no gender reveals, right? You had bought pink clothes and blue clothes, and whatever you had, that's what you got blessed with. Well, Linda Mancha, they were at a marriage retreat, and they told my mom she was going to have a man of God, a boy that was going to serve the Lord. And my dad stood on that promise and that prophecy. And my dad had said he hit his knees from the moment he heard that, knowing that God promised him a man that was going to serve the Lord. And it wasn't like that, but God promised, and my dad stood on that promise. And he prayed for 40 years for my salvation. He didn't get to see the promise, but it got fulfilled through his prayer and his faith. I've been saved. And what I would say to anybody is, don't give up. Don't give up on your loved ones. Don't give up on your sons, your daughters, your uncles, your aunts. Keep praying, because we serve a God that can do anything. And I'm a miracle. My mom and dad were praying. My mom and sister were praying for a miracle that my dad would get saved. But the real miracle was I got saved. And now I'm here with my family. I'm with my wife. I'm with my mom and my sister. And I'm saved. And, I could just say is just keep praying, keep praying for them. Keep praying and hoping that God one day will answer your prayers, and he will. It might not be in the time of the lifespan like my dad. He didn't get to see it, but it still was fulfilled because God promised. We serve a promising God.